What up, Oasis?
Hey.
Good morrow.
You guys, it snowed this morning.
Yeah.
You don't like it?
No.
See, it's like 40-mile-per-hour winds, which makes it
Worse.
significantly
Very,
worse.
very much worse.
But I'm not going to lie, I haven't been ready for the snow. I even told our leaders on Monday night I was really not ready for the snow. And then I woke up and I saw it and I was like, it's kind of nice. No?
I slid this morning.
You did?
Yeah.
You fell
Holy
down?
cow.
Oh.
No, in our car, right?
In my car.
Oh.
Yeah.
Man, you must have been
I-
driving crazy. It wasn't that much snow.
What are you doing,
I
you
was driving
psycho?
20 miles an hour, and I got
Just
to...
whipping into the parking lot.
That's that Kansas driving right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's 3 flakes on the ground, and my brakes already don't work.
That's
that
wild.
Kansas vehicle
Yeah,
right there.
I was like turning right onto 6th Street, like at the stoplight, and I realized, oh my gosh, my brakes are making a weird sound and my car's not stopping. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just turn.
And
And
then
then
you're
right behind me was a cop.
Oh.
I didn't get pulled over though.
Yeah,
okay.
you know why? Because they're
'Cause
pretty
they-
gracious.
And they saw my out-of-state
Oh,
license
okay.
tag.
And they were like, she just
And they
doesn't
She
just
doesn't know what she's
assumed.
doing.
Yeah.
Kansas, that's close to Texas, right? No, we'll just let her go.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you guys ever been pulled over?
Yes, I have been pulled over before, and it always freaks me out.
Yeah.
I don't like. I know they're just doing their job, but man, I there's not really a more stressful situation in my life than when I'm going 32 into 25 and I see the red and blue behind me.
Mhm.
And it doesn't happen that often, but the worst one I think I can remember was I was coming to work and I was driving down Orchard, which is the street Grace Point is on. It's a 25, but it's a fairly like busy road for a 25, and so I sometimes get a little bit distracted and end up pushing 30, 32, never more than 32. I wouldn't dare go 33, but sometimes 32, just if I'm not paying attention, you know? And all of a sudden I drove past this cop, looked over, and I have this philosophy that if you make eye contact with the cop when you're in the wrong,
You're good?
100% pulled over.
Oh, 100%?
Yeah. Because they know you're in the wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm going 32 and I drive past them and I see them, but I don't look like I just out of the peripheral, just like trying to make sure, then I feel like, oh, they probably didn't even know they were speeding.
Yeah.
But if I see them and then they see me and we make eye contact while I'm speeding, they know that I know I did something wrong. And so they're like, all right, I got to get him now.
Yeah.
So that happened, right? Sad. Oh, bummer. Pulls me over in front of the church. Like I'm talking 15 steps from where I'm about to go for my final destination for that day. And he pulls up and, he did the cop thing.
Yeah.
Hey, where are you going? And I just pointed. I literally pointed. I said, I work right here and I'm going to put my car in park and walk inside after this. And he said, oh man, well. And then he walked away and he came back. He gave me my ticket and then he said, have a good day. And that was it. And I had to walk inside. I literally just got out of my car at that point and walked inside. And everybody's like, oh, you look kind of down. It's like, well, yeah, it's like $120. It was so, he could have just said, oh, well, like, do you work here? You're a Christian? I'm a Christian. I'll let you go.
That's
But
not how it works, man.
It's not how it works.
Still broke
he
the
was
law.
he was upholding justice,
Yeah.
even though I was literally at my destination.
Just sinner.
So that was like 3 years ago. I've grown a lot since
Okay.
then.
Last time I got pulled over was, I think, like 7 or 8 years ago because I had a light out.
Front or back?
Front.
Front.
It's always the front.
Doesn't your car tell you that?
Not the car I had at the time
Okay.
did not tell me that.
Was it the van?
It was the van.
I remember Ben used to drive this awesome gold van.
It wasn't gold.
What type of van?
Wasn't it like gold silver?
I thought it was maybe. I guess I don't remember. We had it for less than a year because we bought it for $1 from my wife's grandparents. Because it had like
You drove it for a
200,000.
very, very short amount of time.
I would have
here
driven
in
forever.
Brookings.
It just died.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Because I think you were commuting from Watertown and Brookings back in the van.
I wasn't. I was in. My wife was still in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Abby
just
was
remember
still
the-
in
okay.
Watertown. I was here.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I had the
gotcha.
van.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love that thing.
Because it's kind of like your parents' van.
That they still have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
I
Your
loved
parents
it.
is probably a little bit newer.
I mean, this
it was
thing
a
was-
2004.
Well, this thing was old.
Yeah. This guy was.
It was.
It was
falling
rolling.
apart.
Yeah, it was rolling.
Yeah. There's a reason we got it for $1.
So you got pulled. That's okay.
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
pulled over for that.
Yeah.
Fix
Ticket?
the light? No.
Oh.
Just fix your light. We'll do.
Okay.
Thanks.
There you go. Did you
Done.
fix it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
I didn't know, man.
Listen, when someone tries to keep me accountable to doing the right things, I'm gonna do what I can to
You
make sure
know,
I'm,
I just never want to assume, because you know what happens when you assume.
sometimes you're right,
Sometimes
you're
you're
wrong.
right, sometimes you're wrong. I love it.
I do too.
So go ahead.
So I've only ever been pulled over once. And
That's impressive.
I'm just terrified of police officers, so I don't want to speed. It's just easier to like.
I have a different
not
reason
get...
for I don't want to speed, but that's fair.
The fear of the Lord.
Yes.
So my high school on Wednesdays, you would get out 20 minutes early, but then the fourth Wednesday of the month, you'd get out like 40 minutes early. So teachers could have meetings.
Yeah.
That's what they said happened. That didn't happen. And so there was one Wednesday where I was like, man, I could really go for some Sonic happy hour right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so I decided to go home a different way so I can pass by Sonic. And I'm on this road called Wanamaker, and it's a lot like Louise over by like Sam's
in Sioux Falls.
So it's just nuts.
Mm-hmm, pretty busy.
And there's this part where like you have a school zone and you have to drive 20 miles an hour, and then there's a stoplight. And so I'm at this stoplight, and up in front of me, like, it's a 5-lane road that's going to get condensed down into 2 lanes. And I realize I'm in the wrong lane. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to like wiggle around these cars like to get over. I got to merge soon. So my light turns green and I start driving 40 miles an hour to get around the car. And there's just a cop like standing in the road with a radar gun. And he just like waves me over. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if the construction's really bad. And like I had to go move.
Yeah.
I completely forgot I was still in a school zone. So he like pulls me over on the side street. And he's like, I don't understand what's going on. I thought I was just getting rerouted for construction. So I'm still trying to drive. And then he finally just like stands in front of my car. And he like puts his arm out and is like, stop. And I was like, okay. And then he comes over to my window and he's like, do you know why you're pulled over? And I said, no. And he goes, you're going 41 in a 20-mile-an-hour school zone.
That's tough.
And I just start crying.
Yeah,
It's
like,
double over.
Yeah.
I was just like,
I would have started crying.
I was also in a construction zone too. So like it was like quadruple whammy at that
He just
point.
cut your license up right in front of you.
No, so I give him my license. He goes back in his car for like 15 minutes, comes back out, and he's like, you seemed very genuine that you didn't know what was going on. So he didn't give me anything. He just gave me a warning.
Okay.
I'm-
I know that a lot of the time, women have it unfair. That's just a reality.
Yeah.
Talk to my wife at her job.
Mhm.
It's probably way too much information, but there's a reality in it. I feel like when it comes to cops in South Dakota or in the Midwest,
I've never gotten a warning in my life.
I don't get it. Man.
And I'm trying to be
That's
genuine.
impressive.
You know, like I'm there. I'm like,
That's
I'm so
impressive.
sorry. Like,
I'm
I
proud
got
of
pulled
you.
over
I'm
once on
happy
6th
for
Street
you.
in college.
You deserve it. I'll
And-
say
and
that.
This cop
But,
came up and
come on.
like she was so nice. She was the nicest female cop. Like she was incredible. We were having good banter.
Yeah.
She left. She came back. She
Yeah.
handed me my ticket and I drove. I was like, bro, we were vibing, and she still hit me with the ticket.
I feel like your wife has never gotten a ticket.
No,
Yeah,
she's been
that's-
pulled over 3 times.
Sounds right.
All warnings.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah, rolling stop signs, turning into the wrong lane. She doesn't speed, but yeah, no,
You know,
Interesting.
in a sense, that cop showed me grace.
He did.
he did.
He's super gracious to you.
But yeah, that's what our topic is for today.
Yep.
We are 8 minutes in, guys.
Yeah, that was a long one.
But yeah, we're talking about grace. Grace is just like this really, really big term that we use a lot in the church. It's even in our church name. It's our church mission: encounter grace, give grace, grow in grace.
You did it.
Yeah.
I mean, little turnaround, but that's
Yeah,
the
I got
essence of
confused
it.
with the
Yeah, we thought you
Yeah.
were genuine.
Yeah, it was right.
We'll give
Thank
it to
you.
you.
Yeah.
But like, what does this word grace like truly mean?
Mm-hmm. There's lots of different definitions you can find out there. Anytime you deal with, some people call it Christianese, but just like church language or words that are consistently used in the church, depending on your context, they might be defined a little bit differently. However, we can start with like a basic definition of grace is an overarching term to describe all God's gifts and favor to humanity. It would be based off the word charis that's in the scriptures, or charis, depending on how you want to say it. Do you have a different way to say it?
No, it's good.
Oh,
Charis.
yeah, charis,
I say
charis, charis.
Yeah.
Someone else out there can say it different than me, but that word literally means gift. And so we're talking about grace. We're not talking about something that's achievement based. It's not something you earned. It's not something you deserved. It's something that was given to you. That is the foundational idea of what it means to encounter grace or to get grace, is that you are given this gift of grace.
Yeah, undeserved generosity, free love. There's different aspects and ways that we talk about it.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then Aaron Cloud here, our lead pastor, will talk about grace as the unmerited kindness of God in order to provide his provision and his power for the people of Jesus. And I'll do it a little bit different just because I'm not as smart as he is. And so I just say it's God's undeserved kindness offered to us that leads us to forgiveness and then empowers us in what he's called us to do. And that's kind of the beauty of what grace is it's so multifaceted. Like it is not a simple word we're throwing at you today. Like it's not just this. It's not a simple word, I think is the easiest way for me to say it. Yeah. There is a lot of different things that go into when we talk about grace that we're hopefully going to be able to flesh out for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Before we dive in, maybe let's clarify a couple of terms here, because I think we mentioned three that can kind of get a little tied together. So grace, justice, and mercy. What's kind of the difference between all of these?
Grace is undeserved kindness.
Yep.
It's you are given something that you don't deserve. We could argue that mercy then is we don't get what we do deserve.
Yep.
What justice? What definitely? I'm interested on what you're saying about justice.
So justice is getting what you deserve, I think, is honestly what it's a simple. So I've often explained these three in almost illustration terms. So I say I have an ice cream cone. Emily comes up and she knocks the ice cream cone out of my hand. Justice would be Emily has a punishment for the action she taken. Right. Mercy is this idea of she knocks the ice cream cone out of my hand and I just don't punish her for the wrong she's done to me, and I show her mercy. And so we go separate ways. We let bygones be bygones. Grace would be she knocks the ice cream cone out of my hand. I turn around, I buy 2 more ice cream cones. I eat one and I give one to her, and I give her something she doesn't deserve. That's these three theological ideas. It's like justice, getting what you deserve. So if you do wrong, you get wrong. If you do good, you get good. And then mercy is this place of like just offering forgiveness without anything else. Grace takes another step, and we empower you not only in forgiveness, but to continue to do good in the world. That's good.
I think what's really cool as we start diving into talking about grace here is that, right, it's like an umbrella term and there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think it helps us see how like God's fingerprints have been throughout our lives, like the whole entire time. Grace isn't something you experience once you know who Jesus is. It's not something you experience once like you've shown up to Oasis 8 times. Like grace has been all over your life because that's the goodness of who God is.
That's really good.
I mean, the act of creation is an act of God's grace. It's a gift freely given.
Yeah, to breathe a breath today is a gift of God's grace.
So let's kind of dive in. The first part of grace is, we call it prevenient grace. It is the grace that prepares the heart to respond to God. So this is the grace that before you make a decision to know who Jesus Christ is, there has been a grace at work in your life that prepares your heart to hear the good news of who Jesus is.
That's good. Can you spell prevenient? Nah, just kidding. This is why I can't spell that word every single time. You know, there are certain church words. Sanctification is another one. We're going to hit it in a second. I cannot spell these 2 words. So if you can out there, drop it in the comments. Spell prevenient grace. And then back to the regular schedule program. Sorry. I was just sitting over here smiling because I read that word and I was like, yeah, it's literally in front of me. And I still couldn't spell that.
I had spell
That's
check.
so funny.
9 times out of 10, I'm going to get it wrong.
I don't like to spell.
It's the EI combo, man. I never know what to do. I don't know if it's on the first E. I don't know if it's on the second E. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know.
It's okay.
Okay. Prevenient grace
You
is...
don't need
God
to.
will grace you and empower you to get through it.
To get us back, I mean, prevenient grace starts from this place of we need prevenient grace because of our sin. Like we have separated ourselves from God, and there is no way for us to close that gap again. We have created a distance. We've created separation that we cannot close on our own. And so God, in his goodness, has extended grace to people in order to start to bridge that gap where we might come back to relationship with him.
Well, even a part of, so where Wesley and John Wesley would say prevenient grace, there was an act of prevenient grace on God's part that didn't allow sin to completely take us over and destroy even the image of God within us. Yeah. So there's an act of grace working on behalf, even in the midst of living in sin and being in sin, that the fact that sin just didn't completely destroy our soul, mind, and body is an act of God's grace for us to then get to.
Yeah,
ultimately.
I just preached on Noah's Ark a couple weeks ago, and even that, to save Noah,
Yeah.
to save humanity, is a sense of God's grace that we deserved. Like humanity did not deserve any sort of second chance, yet he provides that for them by letting humanity continue on through the lineage of Noah, and we're here to get to today because of God's grace in those moments.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, all of us, on our own strength, there is no way that we can even know who God is or even, have the strength to follow him. Yet God has poured out upon every single person who has ever or will ever live, his grace so that they may know him. And, a couple places we can look is, John 3:16.
What's that verse say?
That God so loved the world. It's the entire world. It wasn't just, God loved the people at Grace Point. God loved people in South Dakota. It was God has loved and will love every single person that ever lives and breathes. And because of that, his prevenient grace will be poured out on every single person.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go.
No, Titus 2:11 will back that too. It said, "For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people." And God's heart is to, be patient with us in order that we might come to repentance. And
everyone
would
his
come.
desire.
It's his desire, right? And So his heart is to save his creation and the people he's created. And so he extends this prevenient grace. And go ahead.
At work in everyone's heart for all people at all times. That is the prevenient grace of God.
In Romans 5:8 will say, but while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And this imagery is, you don't have to clean yourself up in order for Christ's sacrifice to cover you. You like to come to him. You don't have to like have this perfect put together life. You don't have to have all the answers for God's prevenient grace to lead you to Christ. And the image I like here is like what Christ has done is it's the metaphor I've used before is it's like there are people on death row, right? And they've made a mistake that has put them on death row, and they are rightly and justly on death row, and their life could be taken from them on that space. And you, as someone who is not like guilty, would go and say, I'll take your place. I will sit on death row so that you can be free. And you do that. You make that exchange. And some of that is like, man, yeah, Christ has done that for us. But it even goes a step further because that person who's now released from death row, they didn't make a promise that they're going to live now a different way. Yeah. Like they could then turn around and put themselves back on death row by making more crime, by doing again what they used to do. And that's what Jesus did for us. He offered us this substitution. He traded us and extended us his righteousness without our promise that we would offer back to him the life that he deserves. Like that's the craziness of while we were still sinners, he gave everything and we can still reject it. Yeah. And that's part of this prevenient grace is like it's extended and it's offered to all people. And yet there's still this role we play in accepting and in walking in that prevenient grace.
That's good.
John Wesley kind of described grace with like this image of a house. And so prevenient grace is like being on the porch of the house. It's you've not entered it, but like you've seen the door and you get the choice of like whether or not you're going to partner with God and the Spirit to walk through.
Yeah. And you got to enter the house or not.
For sure.
The choice is yours.
Or even to flip the metaphor. I mean, Revelation 3:20 will talk. God says, I stand at the door and I knock. Yeah. And when he says
the door is there.
The door is there, right? And so God's standing there offering. He says, if anyone opens the door and welcomes me, and I will come in and eat with him and he with me. Like God's saying, I'm at the door. I'm here. I'm knocking for all people. Who's going to answer? Because if they answer, they will have relationship with me. And that's prevenient grace.
That's good.
And so when we accept that invitation, we kind of move into the second part, which is called justifying grace. And this is the grace that works in us to respond to that call.
Yep.
And so even when we choose to follow Jesus, it's not fully like 100% on us. It's us partnering with what God has done in our life to make that response. So even that choice there is evidence that God has been working in your life, which is incredible.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, God does the transformative work of the heart. I mean, we can continue to tweak our inputs and our disciplines, but if we just only work on the outside and we don't invite God through his justifying grace to change and transform our hearts, we try to work against the sin nature that's always a broken part of us.
Yeah.
And maybe for some of us out here, we might need justifying defined a little bit. Yeah. And so like this justifying work of God is really just saying that our sin is forgiven and we have been placed in right standing with God. Yeah. So it's not just that like the slate is wiped clean, but it's that we've also been credited with the righteousness of who Jesus is.
It's forgiveness of sin and acceptance into relationship with God.
Yeah, it's new identity, it's new purpose.
All rooted in what Jesus has
brand
done.
New life. Yep. The old creation is gone, the new creation is here.
Yep.
So part of, I think, Ben, you hit on this, part of walking in the house is saying, I'm going to choose to live in this identity. Like, I'm going to choose to live in this family.
Yeah.
Like, you think of a house is owned by a person who has a deed that has their name on it. And so it's choosing to live with, like, it's choosing to live in God's house.
Yeah, it's choosing to walk into the doorway. It's good.
Yeah, for sure.
I like it.
And I think, too, like, how can we make sure that when we experience justifying grace, it's not something that we feel like we intellectually did or earned, but that it truly was a gift that we received.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is this idea of that's the gospel message. And so when you understand justifying grace, you can understand the gospel message in full, that you haven't ever earned it. The only thing, I think it's Charles Spurgeon, he says, the only thing you contributed to your salvation is the sin that made it necessary. And so even in justifying grace, you step in and you accept this work done by Jesus, which cleanses your heart. And it's not, like you said, this intellectual assent into I have all the answers, I know all the theology, I've got it all figured out, I put the pieces together. Like part of this faith journey is before you've got any of that put together, you can step into God's justifying grace and be made new.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the journey will be starting to put those pieces together.
Yeah.
But some of it is, and especially in our culture, right, we have this high view on like intelligence or having the right answers or being correct. And we will get to all of those things, and we want to have correct theology, and we want to have correct living, and we want to understand the kingdom of God, yet justifying grace can often happen far before any of that has occurred.
Yeah, it's the recognition that I've been reconciled and realigned back with God, not because of anything I've done, but completely because of the work of Jesus Christ on the cross.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
You got to know the
life,
base,
death, and resurrection.
the bare basics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once you're in the house, then we start doing the work of what's called sanctifying grace. So this is just the process where we're made holy, and I also like to, it's made whole.
Yeah.
So like the things that are lacking in us, the things that are not complete, God comes and works in those to present us as people who are whole in His sight.
Yeah, I love this aspect of our theology and of the word. The idea that we've not just been invited to receive forgiveness of sin, but invited into. It's not just what you're saved from, but also what you're saved to.
For sure.
It's been I'm saved from hell and an eternal separation from God, but also saved into an eternity with God. It's not that I've just been saved from my sin by the forgiveness. It's I've been saved into a life of freedom and complete restoration, which is it's God. Sanctifying grace is God's work to restore our divine image back to what it was pre-fall.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Well,
and it's work. And
and
it's
even-
the Holy Spirit doing it.
Even making that so tangible. I remember I was in a life group. Oh man, it was 5-6 years ago, and there was 4 guys in it, and one of the guys was increasingly frustrated because every time he showed up to group, we always had sin to confess. But like, he was like, man, you guys are mature Christians. You're ahead of me in my journey. And I'm just frustrated because I look 3-4 years into my journey and I still see you here saying, hey, this is the sin in my life. And I think that becomes a broken view of Christianity, that it's just this constant way of we're trying to get rid of sin, get rid of sin, get rid of sin. And that is what part of the journey. Yet what he was missing was, hey, all the expression of what has God done in our life that's beautiful and powerful. And now we can testify to like, I'm not who I used to be. Like, even I think just practically, so much of the way we can think is, man, I got to stop this pornography addiction. I got to stop saying those words. I got to stop lying. I got to stop drinking. I got to stop looking at that. I got to stop acting in that way. And it becomes this, man, I'm oppressing or I'm pushing out these negative things, which is a part of the journey. But rather, why don't we talk about how do I love people better?
Yeah.
How do I love myself more? How do I love God more? How do I partner in the kingdom? And there's this twofold to what it looks like to be sanctified.
I think we assume sanctification is behavior modification. So I focus so much on the outcome of what I'm doing and in the consequence of my action and what needs to change there, versus if I am in relationship with God, abiding in Him, He's doing the work to restore me back to helping me be transformed and conformed to the image of Christ, which is the work of the Holy Spirit in us, that's sanctifying grace. Outcome's going to happen. And so we focus so much on, I'm just going to stop doing this, versus how do I love God? How do I abide in Him? And then as He conforms and helps me as He's making me more into Him and like Him, the behavior's going to happen and come. But yeah, it starts with love. For sure. Yeah, that's really good.
That's why I love, there's an author named Thomas Oden. He wrote a book on grace, and he defined grace as refashioning what sinners love. And I love this definition because I think it shows like it's a working in our heart to change what we love. And when our love for God is, as it grows and as it's changed, like it changes what we do with that. So like when we love God, we choose to turn away from sin. Like we say, I don't want to do this because I know it grieves God's heart. And I know that like my identity is in Him. I know that like I'm His child, therefore I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, it's the continuing process of being made perfect in love and removing desire of sin, which that made perfect in love I just love. Because it doesn't mean imperfection. It doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. It says I'm being sanctified. I'm becoming more like Jesus, and I'm being perfected in love. And He's removing the desire to want to sin.
And I even think about Ezekiel 36:26, where it says, I will give you a new heart. I will put my spirit in you. And in that, like, I think there's pieces of that happen across the journey, right? As you have, like, if you have a heart of stone, like, you're not going to be able to respond to the gospel message. You're not gonna be able to respond to His goodness. And yet God at that moment, He gives you a new heart in order to be able to respond. And then as you continue in your journey, like if you're gonna accept that message, like that heart needs to be softened again. That heart needs to be fertile soil in order for the seed of the gospel to take root. And for places in your life where you're like, man, I'm falling short here. I don't love God to the fullest here. Like He's consistently renewing and giving you a new heart. Or even Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ and I no longer live, but the life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave Himself for me. Like that's the new journey of sanctification, is like, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And so every single day I take steps to walk with Him. I'm going to go one more. Francis Fenelon has a quote. He says, Christian perfection is not so tiresome as we think, but to take every step in perfect love of God. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's good.
Like we just make Christian perfection, we make this sanctification journey, we make obedience really, really difficult. But what if every day with every decision, I said, I'm going to try and live in perfect unity and love of God.
Yeah.
Like, what would life look like? It's like, oh, that's not as crazy as some of the things we like to set our goals or agendas for.
Yeah, that's good.
Can I take it one step further?
Go ahead, yeah.
I think we make Christian perfection an unrealistic ideal we need to reach. We take all of the great things from people we notice that are doing really well, and we put it all into this fake image rather than saying, what is the daily act of obedience God is calling me to today?
Yeah.
So rather than saying, like, I need to get all of the stuff in my life figured out, what is, like, the few things God is asking me to do to worship him today?
That's good. That's super good.
So what does it look like for us to practically partner with God as he's sanctifying us in his grace?
Yeah, I think Ben talked about it. I mean, I don't know. If we had a scripture count on here, John 15 probably.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I mean, John 15 is Jesus as the vine. We are the branches, and we stay connected to the vine in order to produce the fruit of the kingdom. And so that fruit is the Galatians 5 spirit, like fruit. That fruit is
love.
Love to God. Like, I mean, it's in the way that we interact. It's living out the commandments. It's living in obedience. And we do that by staying connected to Jesus. So how do we stay connected to Jesus? And we'll talk about the means of grace. We can talk about the spiritual disciplines. But really, there's these ideas of, like, how do we just root our lives deep in the presence of the Lord and never walk a day without him? Right. And as Paul is praying, like, never, Paul talks about pray without ceasing. How do I live in constant communion with God? I'm going to preach this text about the persistent widow. Like, the persistent widow is one who shows up and is wanting consistent, fervent, always the presence of God in prayer. And that's the Christian life. If we can step into how do I always live in God's presence, that's how we continue to experience his grace, because he just offers it to us.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's all we got for grace today.
Yeah.
All we got for grace today. That's all we got.
That's
Not
all I
God's
have.
got for you.
No, for sure.
Hey,
It's good.
go in grace. Like, try one thing today of what it just looks like to be rooted in who God is. That's all I got.
All right.
Amen.
Peace
See ya.
out.